Good morning from London, where IAFOR is currently holding a joint conference on education, arts and humanities, language learning, and aging in gerontology. Next to me are standing experts on artificial intelligence. I would like you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what it is that you do.
I'm Praminda Caleb-Solly. I'm Professor of Embodied Intelligence at the University of Nottingham, and I'm leading a research group in cyber-physical health and assistive robotics technologies. I'm also the new academic director of the National Rehabilitation Centre. And my research is looking at how we can improve people's health and well-being through the use of technology and developing technology so it is a tool to support people to help themselves as much as possible.
My name is Cian O'Donovan. I am a Senior Research Fellow at University College London at the Department of Science and Technology Studies. I'm a social scientist. I'm really interested in who benefits from AI, who pays for AI, who decides who benefits and who pays. And within that, I'm particularly interested in care sectors, folks often neglected from innovation processes and the benefits of innovation.
My name is David Mallows. I'm Director of the Academic Writing Centre at the Institute of Education, which is UCL's Faculty of Education. I'm talking today about assessment in higher education, particularly the way we assess and the way students need to use AI, or way AI needs to be used with them in order for us to change a little bit the way we assess students in higher education.
One of the big things, some regard it as a benefit of using artificial intelligence and some see it as a problem, is inclusiveness. How does AI in your respective fields, obviously you're coming from three different areas, healthcare and medicine, then maybe sociopolitics and education. How does AI in your fields promote inclusiveness?
It doesn't. I don't think we should accept that it certainly will. In some ways, for us, it takes language out of the assessment of learning. It takes that problem that if you don't write well, you don't do well in academia. That's a big challenge for academia and a big challenge for universities, particularly in terms of assessment. It also, I think, it does allow people to access knowledge that they wouldn't normally be able to access, that previously when I studied I needed to go into a library and find things. Already the internet has changed that, but AI is a huge step forward in terms of access to knowledge. But, and I'm sure Cian will talk about this sort of thing, who decides what knowledge we have access to and how we access it is a very big question.
So in terms of accessibility in healthcare, specifically, I think AI is well suited for enabling technology to become adaptable to people's personal needs. So if somebody's got a visual impairment or a cognitive impairment, speech impairment, then we're looking to see how AI can be used to customize different ways in which people can communicate, connect, be in different places. So from that point of view, accessibility is one of the key elements where AI is helping. On the other hand, if we look at a broader definition of inclusiveness, then one of the things to consider is around how do we ensure we can democratize access to AI. There are big issues associated with costs and having the right kind of technology infrastructure to be able to get access to these. So from that point of view, there are some still open questions on how we're going to enable that to happen.
Yeah, I think absolutely agree, Praminda, with what you're saying. They're the really big issues. I think if we look at the current generation of AI technologies, particularly the large language models like ChatGPT, we see a very small number of firms, 4, 5, 6 firms, have a huge share of the market. And that looks like, at that kind of level, that looks like that is continuing and I think probably exaggerating the dominance of large technology in marketplaces, and I think we need regulations, and we, as Praminda said, we need democracy, we need strong rules, and we need to really tackle something Praminda said in her talk earlier. We need to tackle inclusion at the level of the innovation process itself, ensuring that the folks who are usually left out of those processes are included all along the way, whether that's their data, whether that's their values, whether that's their voice.
That's an excellent point that leads to the next question. So we talked about inclusion when it comes to people who use AI, but then what about the decision makers behind AI? International cooperation is becoming increasingly multilateral, with the emerging economies also having a saying in regulation. Should AI be an area that is included in this multilateral cooperation? And do we see some change in who gets to say, or do we still see a problem with who sits at the table?
For me, I mean, there's new tables being created all the time, right? And we see organisations. Well, we see the last Prime Minister here, Rishi Sunak, his kind of advancement of AI safety institutes and his promotion of that framing of inclusion and that framing, I think, of risk was a certain thing, right? And to some extent, that's great. We see, and we saw a conference in South Korea a couple of months ago. We see different countries come to the table. The terms of debate there are really important. Are they talking about risk and safety, or are they talking at those tables about what I would argue are much more important democratic matters of inclusion that we just talked about? So it's not just bringing people around the table. It's the terms of the debate for me that are really important at that geopolitical level.
So for me, there is another element to this, and that is around to develop robust AI systems, you need access to good quality data. And for smaller sized innovators, that can be a problem when the data is held and is made accessible from larger organizations. So not being able to access the underlying infrastructure, the computing resources that are needed, will mean that some of the other smaller players who might have more useful and maybe more community-oriented ideas to bring are not able to do that development. And for me, that is one of the big problems. And also, to be able to do validation and be able to address some of the regulatory issues also requires resources. So we also have to consider when these additional laws and rules are being put into place, how do we facilitate people in having the resources to be able to rise to those standards as well?
Yeah, I haven't got much to add to that, apart from just to include teachers in that mix. Quite often technology is done to teachers, and they're not part of the process of developing it. And that doesn't seem to me a very wise way to develop a system that teachers are then going to use, and they're going to use in education. And educators aren't particularly powerful people around the world. They're not big corporations, they're not big governments, they're not financially or militarily or in any way powerful, and yet they're so important. And they're so important to how we end up using AI, because AI will be used in education. It's used here in these buildings and used in the universities, but it's also used outside. So part of the job of the educator is to help people to use it effectively, ethically, and in ways that don't damage society, don't damage the environment. And AI's got already quite bad form in all of those things. So educators, I really think, need to be involved.
What does ethical AI mean then? Especially if you have multicultural cooperation, and then every culture defines ethics differently. How do we get a consensus on what ethical AI is?
I don't think we ever will. No, as you say, there are different cultural perspectives on ethics. I mean, I can only speak to it from the perspective of academic integrity in a university. How do I know that's proof of somebody's learning? How do I see that on the paper? Now, we've always crossed our fingers and assumed that somebody writing a 5,000-word essay demonstrates their learning. Did it? AI's made us question that quite quickly and quite radically and in a slight panic. We were talking before about rabbits in the headlights. And it really is a moment in which the university needs to rethink these assumptions that if somebody writes well, they've learned. And that writing is evidence that then society will think that's the person we need, that's the person who's going to help us, because they're good at, and we're sure we're all good at making sentences. sentences aren't always that valuable out in the real world. So maybe AI will make us think a little bit more about what we see as valuable, the valuable knowledge a university can produce, and the way in which we, in an ethical way, use AI to demonstrate that we've learned something. But I don't think that's a very simple process for universities that are quite addicted to text.
Something I'm going to mention in my talk later, very briefly, is that I think the dominant way in which ethics has been used around AI debates has been to distract people from the politics of AI and make them focus on predominantly individual values, values like transparency, values like privacy, values like accountability. These are all important, yes, but they ignore the collective and the wider impacts of technologies on society. And I think that's a distraction, and we need to move on from that.
I think you're absolutely right, Cian, and I think we need to be investing more in the methodologies of how we develop AI systems, and that's about how do we represent knowledge that is currently not there, so from marginalized group or underrepresented groups. There was an issue around a new AI system for looking at blood oxygen levels, which was developed predominantly on fairer skins, which then wouldn't work on darker skins. And so it's our responsibility about the systems themselves being developed to have checks within them to ensure that they are ethical in how they represent other people's views and how they present information that then allows people to have benefit from that. So I think you're right. A bit too much thinking on the regulations might be stymieing some of the research and the resources into actually thinking of new ways in which knowledge can be represented and used.
That goes back to inclusion and what we talked about earlier. On another note, a lot of young people are using AI, and this came up at another conference, that they don't really realize that they are using AI in their everyday lives. How dangerous is that?
So I think, again, it's about education and knowledge and understanding, and then it's our responsibility as academics and how we're doing that, how we're going about helping people understand, but also, like you said, David, it's recognizing what are the skills that we need for the future society, working with and alongside these systems. And so I don't think we're there yet in trying to understand what happens best. So, but this is something we're always dealing with. I'm not worried about AI because I see it as a tool, and humans will always have their creativity. That's where we've got to today, and we can go further with these tools to help us accelerate some of what has been taking a lot of time to do, like discovering new medicines and chemicals, etc., that are safe in the environment. So it's really about how do we empower ourselves to continue to be productive and make use of the tools as they are.
And, the idea of thinking of AI as a tool, I mean, lots of tools have disrupted education in the past, and we've adapted to them. In our courses at the Institute, we class the three classes. You can either decide that your students are not allowed to use AI at all, which seems a very stupid thing to do, but some people have chosen to do that. I don't think that the students are actually not using it, but they're forced to mask it, and they're forced not to use it. Others, the level 2, students have to acknowledge that they've used it, reference it essentially, say, this draft was produced by ChatGPT, and the third one, which I think is where we all need to get to, is students are forced to use it. And by forcing them to use it, we can build their critical evaluation of text, because ChatGPT produces some rubbish. It really does produce rubbish, and it will get better, but I don't think it'll even 5 years from now, it will still produce rubbish. It also produces very normative text. That's what it's built on. It predicts what the next word is most likely to be. So creativity is just lost. And if we can get students to look at those texts and evaluate in using critical literacies, those are the skills they're going to need in the real world, because they are going to have to evaluate information from all over, different sources, from people, from machines, from corporations. And if there are just 4 or 5 firms producing and moulding that knowledge, we need people to critically evaluate what they're being presented with. So again, going back to the university and the way we assess, we really need to assess. Go all the way back to Freire in the 1960s was telling us that criticality was the most important thing in education, and criticality leads to the ability to affect change in a society. And the university now, we've got a great opportunity to do that by asking people to look at what looks like a fabulous essay that ChatGPT's just produced, but actually is full of silly assumptions, old or invented references. Perfect opportunity to say, actually, that text isn't as good because the argument doesn't flow, because the evidence is not presented well, there's no acknowledgement of this, all of those different issues that we want people to do. So critical literacy, I think, is a really key element.
I'm going to add one point to that, to those great points that David made, and it's this. Over the last 10 to 20 years, certainly in the UK, and I know in other countries, there's been a huge focus on STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering, maths. If we take what David has just said seriously, then we need to address the balance, and we need to recover those critical skills from arts and humanities subjects, and we need a much bigger investment in those subjects that will empower students throughout their lives to ask some of the questions, David, you're talking about.
Is there a threshold, if you will, where young people or students or children understand what is right and what is wrong, and therefore they can, by themselves, evaluate whether it's right or wrong to use AI in an unethical way? And should there be an age limit then to when to start using AI?
Does somebody want to take this?
I can say I have absolutely no idea at all. I'm an adult educator, I don't know very much about child development, but I would suggest as a parent, no. I don't think there's a particular age. I think there are particular people, environments, contexts, the education we give people. I presume, and there was a poster yesterday about AI with primary school children that looked fascinating to me. Why not? Why not introduce it? They'll have toys with AI pretty soon.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I also want to add that there's something around our development process, which is about being able to use our hands and understand the world. And so being able to play with real Play-Doh and clay and mud and be out in the garden is about how we develop our cognitive awareness of the spaces around us, etc. So we have to be careful if everything is done in a simulated world on a screen. I'm not a psychologist either, but I would imagine that could possibly stymie some of our development.
What is your outlook on using AI in your respective fields?
I would like to see it developed as a collaborative tool. So one of the things for me, the question you asked earlier around ethical AI, to me that means us keeping our autonomy and agency. And so how can we make these systems collaborative so they're able to learn continuously and incorporate what is important to us and how we can communicate that to them. So for me, accessibility of the tools is really important. It shouldn't be a black box that somebody else has developed that you cannot know why it's telling you something, and to be able to make sure that you actually understand why it's telling you something. So, and be able to continuously develop it. But we're not there with that yet. We're still looking at black boxes. So for me, the future development is opening that up.
I'm going to slightly flip the question. And one interest I have, and with colleagues at UCL STS, we're just starting to do some work on this, is looking at how AI is influencing research in other fields. So in fields like agriculture, in fields like health science, in fields like care, is AI crowding in certain approaches? Is it privileging certain kinds of knowledge and certain kinds of solution? Or, as Praminda says in a very hopeful way, is it opening up new forms of collaboration? What do we see? Is it helping, say, with the Sustainable Development Goals? In what way? Technocratic solutions or collective, caring solutions? That's a research question. I want to find that out.
Yeah, I mean, I go back to criticality. You know, that's where it's going to change the way universities work. It's going to change the way we assess, and therefore, I presume it's also going to change the type of knowledge that we value within the university. And so, in my area, I work in applied linguistics. About language learning, it's had a massive impact already. Machine translation has facilitated so much interchange between people and also so much language learning. That's just a small example, and I know there's better AI than Google Translate, but I think the same way with the text that we're using and the text that we're assessing with, if we're not careful, the text that we're assessing with will become quite irrelevant because there are texts in the past that can do that job. And we won't produce the new ideas because we expect them to come in text form, and text form is not where people are working. And the other thing I'd say is that it will force the university to think about the process of learning, not the product of learning. And the product is that written assignment, that text or that report, the dissertation, and it's not the presentation of those ideas in perfectly formed sentences that matters. It's the fact that person has changed by writing that text. The text is not the important thing, it's the person who's the important thing, which is difficult to tell to people when they're doing their dissertations, and that's the only important thing, but it's the person who changes by writing. And if the machine does it, the person won't change, and therefore what's the point of the university?
And I just wanted to make a plug for embodied AI. So we've got AI at the moment that sits behind the screen, on a server somewhere. And I think to really realize the full potential, it is about incorporating it into a system that can go around our world and collect information and data through sensors about that world in real time and then be able to act on it. So thinking about the future of AI and in terms of incorporated into real bodies around us is something that I'd like to see happen.
Great interdisciplinary discussion. Thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to your presentations. Thank you for giving your presentation, and enjoy the conference. Thank you. Thank you.